The Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the wooden porch, where Michael Harper stood surveying his land. At 37, the lines around his eyes had deepened, etched there, by years of working outdoors and the grief that had become his silent companion. His calloused hands gripped the porch railing, sturdy and weathered like the man himself. Inside the modest log cabin, 9-year-old Lucy was setting the table for dinner, carefully placing 2 plates across from each other, like she had done every night since her mother died 3 years ago. The ritual remained unchanged, a small act of normalcy in a world that had been anything but normal since Ellen's cancer took her. Michael watched his breath form small clouds in the crisp autumn air. Winter in Montana came early, and he still had so much to prepare. The stack of firewood wasn't nearly high enough. Roof needed patching before the first snow, and the property taxes were due again. Problems had a way of piling up faster than solutions. The phone call from Sunset Valley Care Center this morning was just one more weight added to his already burdened shoulders. Martha's care costs were increasing again, and they were sorry, but without additional payment, alternative arrangements would need to be made. The clinical tone didn't mask the reality his mother-in-law might lose the only home she had left, the place where she clung to fading memories of her daughter. Lucy appeared in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the warm light from inside. The wooden floors creaked beneath her feet as she stepped onto the porch, a red woolen hat pulled down over her ears, despite the fact that dinner was ready. "I made mac and cheese, Dad, with the extra cheese on top, like Mom used to." Michael forced the worry lines from his forehead and turned to his daughter with a practiced smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes, but was genuine in its effort. Lucy was perceptive in the way children who have faced loss often are, seeing beneath surfaces, understanding the weight of silence. "Sounds perfect, kiddo. Just what we need on a night like this." Lucy's eyes, so like Ellen's, studied him carefully. "Is everything okay? You've been standing out here a long time." Michael knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. Her concern for him was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. She shouldn't have to worry about adult problems. She should be focused on friends and school projects and whatever 9-year-old girls were supposed to care about. "Everything's fine, Lucy Goose. Just planning what we need to do this weekend. Thinking maybe we should go collect some more firewood tomorrow after school." The nickname from her toddler years still brought a small smile to her face, though she'd recently informed him that she was too old for it. Tonight she didn't correct him. Instead, she nodded solemnly, her breath making little clouds that mingled with his. "Grandma Martha's getting worse, isn't she?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He had tried to shield Lucy from the financial struggles, from the reality that her grandmother's dementia was progressing, that the specialized care was becoming more than they could afford. But Lucy had Ellen's intuition, the ability to sense the undercurrents of worry. "She's having some tough days. The doctors are helping her, but..." Michael's voice trailed off. "How do you explain to a child that sometimes even your best isn't enough?" Lucy took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his calloused palm. "We could sell some of my toys. Or I could help you with more chores around here so you can work more." The lump in Michael's throat made it hard to speak. He pulled Lucy into a tight hug, burying his face in her hair that smelled of the apple shampoo Ellen used to buy. "You're the best daughter a dad could ask for, you know that. But your job is to be a kid. Go to school and draw those amazing pictures. My job is to figure out the grown-up stuff." Lucy pulled back, fixing him with a look too serious for her years. "But we're a team, right? That's what Mom always said. We're the Harper team." Michael nodded, unable to argue with Ellen's words. "Yeah, we're a team. The best team. Now let's go eat that mac and cheese before it gets cold." As they walked inside, the phone rang. Michael glanced at the caller ID and recognized the bank's number. He let it go to voicemail, unwilling to let anything else intrude on dinner with his daughter. Whatever new problem they wanted to discuss about the mortgage could wait until morning. Some battles were for tomorrow. Tonight was for Lucy. The next afternoon, Michael's truck rumbled down the logging road that cut through the dense pine forest behind their property. Lucy sat beside him in the passenger seat, a sketchbook balanced on her knees as she captured the golden light filtering through the trees. The truck bed was already half filled with logs. They had collected enough to last a few weeks once split. Michael was grateful for these moments of simple work. In the rhythmic swing of the axe and the solid weight of timber, he found temporary peace from the mounting pressures. The bank had left another message about payment options, and possible foreclosure proceedings. Banker's language for "we're running out of patience." Lucy tucked her pencil behind her ear, a habit she had picked up from watching Michael mark measurements on wood. "I think we should go a little further today. The best logs were past that big clearing last time." Michael checked his watch. They had about an hour of good daylight left. That should give them enough time to reach the clearing, gather another armload, and head back before dusk settled in. "All right, navigator, lead the way." Lucy beamed at the responsibility, pointing ahead with authority. As they rounded the bend where the road narrowed, Michael slowed the truck. Something unusual caught his eye through the trees, a flash of white that didn't belong among the autumn colors. "Dad, what's that?" Lucy pressed her face against the window glass. Michael squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Not sure. Stay in the truck for a minute, okay?" He pulled to the side of the road and stepped out, leaving the engine running. As he approached, the white shape took form, fabric delicate and formal, completely out of place in the wilderness. And then he saw her. A woman sat slumped in a wheelchair just off the logging road, her head bowed, golden hair falling in disarray around her face. She wore what appeared to be a wedding dress, now torn and soiled along the hem. One wheel of the chair was caught against a rock, tilting the entire apparatus at an awkward angle. Michael approached cautiously, making enough noise with his footsteps to alert her to his presence without startling her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman's head snapped up, revealing a face that, despite being pale with cold and streaked with tears, was strikingly beautiful. Her eyes, blue as Montana sky, widened with something between fear and disbelief. I think so." Her voice was soft, refined, with the hint of an accent he couldn't place. Not local, that much was certain. Michael glanced around, looking for any sign of a vehicle companions, anything that might explain her presence here miles from the nearest town. There was nothing. "Did you have an accident? Is there someone I should call?" The woman seemed to struggle with the question, as if weighing what to say. My wheelchair broke. The wheel came off back there. I tried to keep going." Michael knelt beside the chair, inspecting the damaged wheel. The question of what a woman in a wedding dress and wheelchair was doing alone on a remote logging road burned in his mind, but there were more immediate concerns. The temperature was dropping, and her hands were red with cold. "Where were you headed? Do you have someone expecting you?" She hesitated again, her eyes darting briefly toward the road behind her. "Anywhere but back," she finally said, her voice barely audible. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air ran down Michael's spine. Those 3 words carried more weight than any explanation could have. He recognized the look in her eyes, the desperation of someone fleeing something or someone. Lucy's face appeared at the truck window, curiosity overcoming her promise to stay put. Michael made a quick decision. "My name's Michael Harper. That's my daughter Lucy. We live about 20 minutes down the ridge. I can help fix your chair or give you a ride somewhere, or..." He let the offer hang open-ended. "Charlotte." The woman extended a trembling hand. "I'm Charlotte." Michael noticed the absence of a last name but didn't press. "I'm going to help you into the truck, if that's okay. We can figure out the next steps somewhere warmer." She nodded, and as Michael carefully lifted her from the wheelchair, he felt her wince slightly. His movements slowed instinctively. "Sorry," he murmured. "It's okay. I'm just not used to being carried." Her weight was slight in his arms, almost fragile, contrasting with the strength he sensed beneath her vulnerability. He settled her gently in the passenger seat, while Lucy scrambled to the middle, watching the strange woman with undisguised curiosity. "Are you a real bride?" Lucy asked as Michael folded the wheelchair and secured it in the truck bed alongside the firewood. Charlotte looked down at her tattered dress, and for a moment emotion flashed across her face. Too complex to read. "Not anymore, I don't think." Lucy nodded with the solemn understanding of a child who had faced her own losses. "That's okay. My mom's gone too, but Dad takes really good care of me." Michael climbed into the driver's seat in time to hear Lucy's words at a familiar ache tightening his chest. He shot Charlotte an apologetic glance, but she was looking at Lucy with a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I'm sure he does. Your dad seems like a very kind man." The drive back to the Harper home was mostly silent, save for Lucy's occasional questions that Michael tried to gently deflect. Charlotte stared out the window, her reflection in the glass revealing nothing of her thoughts. The wedding dress pooled around her like fallen snow, incongruous against the worn leather of the truck seat. Michael's mind raced with questions and concerns. The protective instinct that had guided him since Ellen's death warred with the compassion he couldn't ignore. This woman clearly needed help, but bringing a stranger into their home, their safe haven, wasn't a decision to take lightly. Yet as he glanced at her profile, something told him this wasn't a threat, but a person at the end of her rope. He'd been there himself, standing at the edge of what felt like an abyss after Ellen died. If not for the kindness of neighbors and friends, he and Lucy might not have made it through those darkest days. Sometimes kindness was the only currency worth trading in. The cabin came into view as they rounded the final bend, smoke curling from the chimney where the morning's fire still smoldered. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a living room that opened to the kitchen, a small bathroom, and the porch that wrapped around 2 sides. But it was home. The workshop stood separate, a larger structure, where Michael crafted the furniture that provided their modest income. Charlotte's eyes widened slightly as they approached, taking in the rustic simplicity of the place. Michael found himself seeing it through her eyes. The weathered logs, the mismatched chairs on the porch, Lucy's red boots by the door. Humble but honest. It's not much, but it's warm. I've got a guest room. Well, more of an office with a pull-out couch, but it's comfortable. Charlotte turned to him, something like wonder in her expression. Thank you, you don't even know me. Michael helped her from the truck, lifting her with careful hands. The same could be said about you. You don't know me either. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I know enough. Your daughter thinks the world of you. Children are the best judges of character. As Michael carried Charlotte up the porch steps, Lucy ran ahead to open the door, excitement evident in her movements. The little girl had already switched into hostess mode, a role she took seriously whenever they had rare visitors. I made your bed already with the blue blanket because it's the softest one we have. And I put flowers on the nightstand. They're just from our yard, but they smell nice. Charlotte's expression softened as she took in Lucy's efforts. That's very thoughtful of you. The flowers are beautiful. Michael set Charlotte gently on the couch, noticing how she arranged her dress with practiced elegance despite its bedraggled state. Lucy hovered nearby, clearly enchanted by their mysterious visitor. You look like a princess, even with your dress all messy. Lucy's honesty made Michael wince, but Charlotte laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. I'm definitely not a princess. Princesses don't get left on the side of the road. The words slipped out before she could catch them, and her expression immediately closed. Michael and Lucy exchanged a glance, an entire conversation passing between father and daughter without words. Lucy, with a wisdom beyond her years, understood the cue to give Charlotte space. I'm going to make hot chocolate. Dad makes the best hot chocolate in Montana, Lucy announced before disappearing into the kitchen. Michael sat in the armchair across from Charlotte, careful to give her breathing room. I can take a look at your wheelchair tonight, see if I can fix the wheel. And tomorrow I can drive you wherever you need to go. Charlotte's fingers twisted in her lap. I don't really have anywhere to go right now. The admission hung in the air between them. Michael nodded slowly, processing what she wasn't saying. No one waiting for you, family? She shook her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. Not anymore. My fiancé made that very clear when he left me at a gas station after I told him about my condition. Michael's jaw tightened. What kind of man abandons his bride-to-be, the kind who only wanted the package deal? The wealthy wife with the powerful father. When I told him I'd lost everything, including the use of my legs, Charlotte's voice trailed off, her eyes distant with memory. Let's just say his true colors showed quickly enough. The pieces were starting to fit together, though Michael sensed there was still much she wasn't saying. Anger simmered beneath his calm exterior, not directed at her, but at the faceless man who had discarded her like unwanted baggage. Well, you can stay here until you figure things out. It's not fancy, but it's safe. Charlotte studied him as if searching for the catch, the hidden agenda. Finding none, she nodded, a single tear escaping before she could wipe it away. Why are you being so kind to a complete stranger? Michael considered the question, aware that his answer mattered more than casual reassurance. Because someone once told me that kindness matters most during the hardest times. And I've had my hard times. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. Two people who had seen the bottom fall out of their worlds, who recognized the particular pain in each other's gaze. The spell was broken by Lucy returning with 3 mugs of hot chocolate, Balanced carefully on a tray, her face a picture of concentration. Whipped cream was piled high on each mug with chocolate sprinkles on top. The Harper special occasion treatment. Charlotte accepted her mug with both hands, cradling it as if absorbing its warmth. Thank you, Lucy. This looks amazing. Michael watched his daughter beam under the praise already growing attached to their unexpected guest. He should be more cautious, he knew. But something about Charlotte's presence felt right, as if the universe had orchestrated this unlikely meeting. That night, after Lucy had gone to bed and Charlotte was settled in the small guest room, Michael sat at the kitchen table with the damaged wheelchair. His tools were spread out before him, the wheel separated from the frame. The problem wasn't complicated. A bent axle and some stripped screws, things he could fix with what he had in the workshop. As he worked, his mind kept returning to Charlotte. Her story had holes, questions he hadn't asked out of respect for her privacy. But instinct told him she was running from more than just a callous fiancé. The fear in her eyes when she said anywhere but back spoke of deeper troubles. The wall phone rang, breaking his concentration. He quickly answered before it could wake Lucy or Charlotte. Mr. Harper, Thomas Reynolds from First Heritage Bank. Michael's stomach tightened. Yes, Mr. Reynolds. I'm calling about your mortgage payment. We're now looking at 60 days past due, and I'm afraid we need to discuss options before this goes to the foreclosure department. Michael rubbed his forehead, the headache that had been threatening all day, finally taking hold. I understand. I'll have something for you by the end of the week. Business has picked up. The lie came easily, born of desperation rather than dishonesty. The truth was that his custom furniture orders had slowed with the economy, and Martha's care consumed what little savings they had left after Ellen's medical bills. Mr. Harper, we've been patient because of your situation, but the bank has policies that even I can't circumvent indefinitely. The conversation continued in the same vein. Polite pressure from the banker, promises Michael wasn't sure he could keep. When he finally hung up, the weight of his responsibilities pressed down harder than ever. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Michael turned to find Charlotte in the doorway, seated in Lucy's old desk chair that he'd brought in for her temporary use. She had changed into clothes Lucy had found. An oversized flannel shirt that must have belonged to Ellen, and a pair of sweatpants rolled up at the ankles. I couldn't sleep, and I heard your voice. Charlotte's eyes fell on the wheelchair parts scattered across the table. You're fixing it, Michael nodded, grateful for the change of subject. It's not too complicated. The axle needs straightening and a couple of new bolts. Charlotte wheeled herself closer, watching his hands as they returned to work. You're good with tools. It was a simple observation, but Michael felt an unexpected warmth at the acknowledgement. Had it been so long since anyone had noticed his capabilities rather than his struggles? I've always been better with my hands than with words. My dad taught me. He was a carpenter too, but he worked construction mostly. I prefer the detail work. Furniture, cabinets, things that last. Charlotte nodded toward the dining table where they had eaten earlier. You made that? And the chairs. Michael couldn't keep the pride from his voice. Walnut. Took me most of last winter, working evenings after Lucy was asleep. Charlotte ran her hand over the smooth surface of the table, appreciating the craftsmanship. It's beautiful. Real artistry. Her genuine admiration touched something in Michael that had been dormant for a long time. Not just pride in his work, but the pleasure of sharing it with someone who understood its value. Thank you. It means something, creating things that become part of a family's daily life, pieces that might get passed down. Charlotte's expression turned wistful. I've always been surrounded by expensive things, but few of them had that kind of meaning or history. Just status symbols, replaceable the moment fashion changed. The casual reference to wealth confirmed what Michael had suspected from her manner and speech. She came from money, significant money. The contrast between her former life and his simple cabin couldn't be more stark. Different worlds, he thought. Yet here she was, wearing Ellen's old clothes, drinking from their chipped mugs, finding comfort in their modest home, when her own grand world had apparently rejected her. They talked late into the night, conversation flowing more easily than Michael would have expected. Charlotte was educated, well-traveled, with a quick mind and genuine curiosity about his work. She asked questions about woodworking that revealed an artistic sensibility, listened intently to his explanations of how different woods had different personalities, different stories to tell. In turn, she shared carefully edited stories of growing up in Manhattan, of studying art history in college, of the disconnect she'd always felt between her authentic self and the polished persona expected in her social circles. What she didn't mention was her last name, the specifics of her family, or exactly what had transpired with her fiancé beyond his abandonment. The omissions hung in the spaces between her words, but Michael didn't press. Everyone had the right to their secrets, especially those running from something. By the time they finally said goodnight, the wheelchair was repaired and something fragile had formed between them. Not quite friendship yet, but the foundation for it. As Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized it had been the longest conversation he'd had with an adult in months. The isolation of grief and single parenthood had narrowed his world more than he'd recognized. Charlotte's presence, however temporary, felt like a window opening in a too long shuttered room. Morning brought new routines. Lucy, excited by their guest, woke early to prepare a special breakfast, slightly burned toast with elaborate patterns of peanut butter and jelly that she proclaimed breakfast art. Michael found Charlotte already at the kitchen table being introduced to Lucy's extensive collection of drawings. "This one's the mountains in winter, and this is our house, but I made it bigger with a tower for stargazing. And this is Dad's workshop with magic tools that build furniture while he sleeps." Charlotte examined each drawing with genuine interest, asking questions that delighted Lucy. "She has real talent," Charlotte told Michael over the rim of her coffee mug. "The proportions, the attention to detail. She sees the world like an artist." The praise made Lucy glow as she continued her art show with renewed enthusiasm. Michael watched them, struck by how naturally Charlotte interacted with his daughter. There was no condescension, no forced enthusiasm, just authentic engagement. When it came at a time for Lucy to catch the school bus, Charlotte helped her pack her backpack, reminding her about the math homework they'd reviewed together the previous evening. The domestic scene felt so natural that Michael had to remind himself that Charlotte was a stranger who had entered their lives less than 24 hours ago. After Lucy departed with a flurry of goodbyes and extracting promises from Charlotte to still be here, when she returned, silence settled over the cabin. Michael cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the awkwardness of being alone with a woman he barely knew yet, who had somehow slipped so easily into their lives. "I have some work to finish in the shop today. Orders that need to go out this week. Charlotte, I know we haven't talked about what happens next, but you're welcome to stay until you figure things out." Charlotte's hands tightened around her coffee mug. "You've already done so much. I don't want to impose. It's not an imposition." Truth be told, Lucy hasn't been this animated in a long time. She lost more than her mother when Ellen died. She lost her sense of security, her belief that the world is a safe place. Understanding filled Charlotte's eyes, and having a stranger suddenly appear doesn't help with that security. Michael shook his head. "Actually, I think seeing that there are still good things that can happen unexpectedly, that might be exactly what she needs. What we both need." The day established a pattern that would continue in the weeks that followed. Michael worked in his shop, crafting tables, chairs, and cabinets for his modest client list. Charlotte, initially uncomfortable with idleness, found ways to contribute. Organizing his paperwork, answering client emails on his ancient desktop computer, even suggesting design modifications that enhanced his pieces. Her business acumen surprised him. She understood profit margins and pricing strategies, helping him realize he had been undervaluing his work for years. When she convinced him to raise his prices by 20% and not a single client balked, Michael began to suspect her background involved more than just art history. Afternoons were devoted to Lucy after school. Charlotte helped with homework, especially art projects, introducing techniques that transformed Lucy's already promising drawings. They baked cookies, read books, and spent hours in imaginative play that Michael hadn't seen his daughter engage in since Ellen's death. The practicalities of Charlotte's disability presented challenges in the cabin that hadn't been designed for wheelchair access. Without being asked, Michael began making modifications. A ramp to the porch, grab bars in the bathroom, lowered shelves in the kitchen. Each improvement was made with care and as if preparing for a permanent arrangement neither of them had discussed. Charlotte noticed, of course. One evening, as Michael installed a custom shelf that would allow her to reach the dishes, she wheeled herself into the kitchen and watched him work. "You're making this place too comfortable for me. I might not want to leave." Though her tone was light, the question beneath her words was real. Michael paused, screwdriver in hand, considering his response. Would that be such a bad thing? The vulnerability in his voice surprised them both. Charlotte's eyes widened and, for a moment, guilt flashed across her features. Gone so quickly, Michael thought he might have imagined it. I'm not, I don't know if I'm good for anyone right now, Michael. I'm still figuring out who I am without all the trappings of my old life. Michael returned to his work, giving her the space of not having to meet his eyes. That makes two of us. I'm still learning who I am without Ellen. Maybe that's not such a bad starting point. Two people rebuilding from the foundation up. Days turned to weeks. Charlotte's presence became woven into the fabric of their daily lives. She learned to navigate the cabin with increasing confidence, developing upper body strength that allowed her more independence. Michael found himself looking forward to evenings when the three of them would gather in the living room, Lucy drawing Charlotte reading aloud, and Michael working on small wooden carvings that had become his meditative practice. The outside world intruded occasionally. The bank continued to call about the mortgage. The care facility sent notices about Martha's account being in arrears. Michael took the calls in private, shouldering the stress alone, unwilling to burden either Lucy or Charlotte with problems he saw as his responsibility. But stress has a way of making itself known, regardless of how carefully it's contained. One evening after Lucy had gone to bed, Charlotte found Michael at the kitchen table surrounded by bills, his head in his hands. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Her voice was gentle, free of pity. Michael looked up, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "Unless you can pull $15,000 out of thin air, not really." The amount slipped out before he could censor himself. The combined total needed to keep both the house and Martha's place at Sunset Valley. Charlotte's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." "It's not your burden." Charlotte wheeled closer, resting her hand on his forearm. "What would happen if you sold this place? Started somewhere smaller?" Michael shook his head, running a hand through hair that needed cutting. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built this cabin, my father expanded it, and I've maintained it. It's more than property. It's our history, Lucy's inheritance. And starting over somewhere else means leaving Ellen too. She's buried on that hill behind the workshop under the oak tree where we got married." The revelation silenced Charlotte. She hadn't known that Ellen's final resting place was here on the property, that Michael's connection to this land ran deeper than economics. "I understand. When you've lost someone, the places that hold their memory become sacred." Michael studied her face, sensing she was speaking from experience rather than platitudes. "Did you lose someone too? Before your fiancé, I mean." Charlotte's gaze drifted to the window where darkness pressed against the glass. "My mother. I was 12. After that, home never felt the same, even though nothing physically changed. It was still the same penthouse with the same furniture, the same view of Central Park. But without her, it became just a place where I lived, not a home." The shared grief created a bridge between them, an understanding that transcended their different backgrounds. Michael reached out, covering her hand with his own. They sat in companionable silence, two souls who had navigated loss and recognized its landscape in each other. October progressed toward November, the Montana autumn painting the world in fiery colors, before surrendering to the approaching winter. Charlotte had been with the Harpers for nearly a month, a fact that sometimes startled her when she paused to consider it. What had begun as temporary refuge had evolved into something that felt dangerously like belonging. On a crisp Saturday morning, Michael announced they were taking a family trip to visit Martha. Charlotte immediately protested, not wanting to intrude on such a personal visit, but Lucy would hear none of it. "Grandma Martha will like you. She gets lonely with just grown-ups to talk to all day. Plus, you tell the best stories." The drive to Sunset Valley Care Center took 40 minutes, winding through mountain roads ablaze with autumn color. Charlotte sat in the passenger seat, her repaired wheelchair secured in the truck bed, listening as Lucy chattered about her grandmother, how she had been a teacher before retirement, how she made the best apple pies, and how sometimes now she forgot things, but still remembered all the words to the lullabies she sang to Lucy's mother. The facility was nicer than Charlotte had expected, given Michael's financial concerns. Nestled against the mountains, the building was designed to resemble a large lodge, rather than an institution, with wide windows offering views of the surrounding forest. Inside, the staff greeted Michael and Lucy with familiar warmth. A nurse named Janet led them to Martha's room, explaining that she was having a good day, clear-minded and responsive. The unspoken implication was that such days were becoming increasingly rare. Martha Harper sat in a comfortable chair by the window, silver hair, neatly arranged, a book open in her lap. At 72, her face carried the gentle map of age, but her eyes remained bright and alert. When Lucy burst into the room, those eyes lit up with recognition and joy. "There's my sunshine girl." Martha's voice was surprisingly strong as she opened her arms to receive Lucy's enthusiastic hug. Michael introduced Charlotte, explaining simply that she was staying with them for a while. Martha's gaze was sharp and assessing as it moved from Charlotte to Michael and back again, picking up on currents neither of them had fully acknowledged. "Well, it's about time you had some proper company, Michael. That old cabin gets too quiet with just the two of you." The visit proceeded pleasantly, with Lucy dominating the conversation, showing Martha her latest drawings and recounting school adventures. Charlotte observed the family dynamic with a mixture of appreciation and envy, the three generations connected by love and shared history despite the challenges of Martha's condition. When Lucy went with Janet to get juice and cookies from the dining room, Martha turned her full attention to Charlotte. "So tell me, dear, what really brings you to our little corner of nowhere? We don't get many city girls out here unless they're running from something." Charlotte blinked, taken aback by the direct question. Michael started to intervene, but Martha waved him off. "Oh, hush, Michael. I may be old and occasionally forgetful, but I can still spot designer clothes beneath a borrowed flannel shirt. The question stands." Charlotte found herself smiling despite her discomfort. "I am running from something in a way. A life that wasn't really mine. Expectations I couldn't live up to anymore. People who only valued what I represented, not who I am." Martha nodded, satisfied with the honesty, if not the specifics. "And what do you think of our Michael and Lucy?" The proprietary hour wasn't lost on Charlotte. This woman was protecting her family wheelchair. Or no wheelchair, stranger or not. "I think they're remarkable. Lucy has an old soul and a brilliant mind. And Michael is the most genuinely good man I've ever known." The words emerged unfiltered, surprising Charlotte with their emotional weight. Martha's expression softened. "He wasn't always so serious, you know. Before Ellen got sick, that man could light up a room with his laugh. Used to play guitar too, though I haven't heard him touch it in years." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, I'm sure Charlotte doesn't need my entire history." Martha patted his hand. "Sometimes, son, it's good to be reminded of who you were before grief reshaped you. There's still music in you somewhere." The remainder of the visit passed in lighter conversation, but Martha's words lingered in the air between Michael and Charlotte on the drive home. Lucy fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement of seeing her grandmother, leaving the adults in contemplative silence. That evening, after Lucy was in bed, Charlotte found Michael on the porch, staring at the stars emerging in the clear night sky. Without a word, she wheeled herself beside him, following his gaze upward. "Your mother-in-law is quite a force of nature." Michael chuckled softly. "That she is. Ellen was the same way, saw right through people, cut to the heart of things. Lucy's got that gift too." Charlotte turned to study his profile, illuminated by the porch light. "Do you still have it? The guitar, I mean." Michael's expression shifted, surprise, followed by something more complex. "It's in the attic, I think. Haven't touched it since before Ellen died. Would you play something for me?" The request hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully address. Michael's hands gripped the porch railing, knuckles whitening slightly. "I don't know if I remember how." Charlotte's voice was soft but certain. "I think some things once learned with love never really leave us. They just wait for the right moment to return." Later that night, as Charlotte prepared for bed in the guest room that had become undeniably hers, she heard it. The soft, tentative sound of guitar strings being tuned, followed by the gentle melody of what might have been a folk song. The music was hesitant at first, fingers remembering their places, but gradually grew more confident. Charlotte sat in the darkness, listening to the music that felt like Michael's soul finding voice again after years of silence. Tears slid down her cheeks, not for her own situation, but for the beauty of witnessing someone reclaiming a piece of themselves they thought was lost forever. In that moment, the guilt she carried intensified. The wheelchair, the paralysis, the elaborate deception she maintained daily weighed on her conscience more heavily than ever before. These people had opened their home, their hearts to her, believing a story that wasn't entirely true. Yet every day that passed made the truth more difficult to reveal. How could she explain that her inability to walk was a choice, a test that had begun with her fiancé, but had somehow expanded to include the Harpers? They would feel betrayed, manipulated, and rightly so. Charlotte wiped away her tears, making a silent promise to herself. Soon she would tell them everything, but not tonight. Tonight she would let the music heal what it could for all of them. 2 more weeks passed, bringing November's first light snow and a fragile sense of normalcy to the unexpected household they had formed. Michael's business improved with Charlotte's guidance, generating enough income to make the minimum payments on the most pressing bills. Lucy thrived with Charlotte's influence, her artwork flourishing, her nightmares becoming less frequent. For Charlotte, the deception became increasingly difficult to maintain. Each morning she exercised in secret when the house was empty, keeping her legs strong despite the pretense of paralysis. Each evening she wrestled with guilt, as Michael and Lucy treated her with a kindness and acceptance she had never experienced in her previous life of privilege. The crisis came on an ordinary Thursday. Michael had gone hunting at dawn, hoping to secure meat for the winter freezer. Lucy was at school. Charlotte, alone in the cabin, decided to risk standing, needing to reach a book on the high shelf in the living room. The sound of the truck returning early was her only warning. Startled, she lost her balance, tumbling to the floor with a cry of pain. The front door opened as she scrambled to reach her wheelchair, but it was too late. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, rifle case in hand, staring at Charlotte on the floor. Charlotte, who was clearly trying to crawl toward her wheelchair using legs that supposedly couldn't move. Their eyes met, and in that moment, both knew that everything had changed. The trust they had built, the fragile family they had begun to form, the future they had started to imagine. All of it hanging by a thread that had just unraveled. "I can explain." Charlotte's voice shook with the knowledge that no explanation might be enough to repair what her deception had broken. Michael's expression hardened, pain and betrayal washing over his features like a physical wave. "Yeah, I think you'd better." The weight of words unsaid filled the space between them. Heavier than any mountain snow, colder than the Montana winter, waiting just beyond the door. The silence in the cabin stretched like wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Michael's hunting jacket still carried the scent of pine and early morning frost as he stood rigid in the doorway. Charlotte remained on the floor, the pretense of paralysis abandoned in the face of undeniable evidence. "Tell me everything. Now." Michael's voice had a dangerous quietness, the kind that suggested shouting might be easier to bear. Charlotte pulled herself up to sit with her back against the couch, legs folded beneath her, in a position that confirmed what he had already witnessed. Her hands trembled as she brushed hair from her face. "I never meant to hurt you or Lucy. That's the truth, even if nothing else was." Michael set his rifle case down with deliberate control and crossed his arms. The cabin suddenly felt smaller than it ever had, the walls pressing in with the weight of deception. "Start from the beginning. Who are you really, Charlotte Mitchell Hall?" "That part is true." Her eyes met his, unflinching despite her shame. "I'm the daughter of Bernard Mitchell, the tech entrepreneur. My family has more money than anyone should have a right to possess, and I've spent my entire life being valued for my bank account rather than my character." Michael's expression didn't soften. "That doesn't explain the wheelchair. The lie you've been living in my home with my daughter." Charlotte's composure cracked. "James, my fiancé, only wanted me for my family connections. I overheard him on the phone before our wedding laughing about how he was marrying the Mitchell bank account and planning to use my father's influence to fund his startup." She paused, the memory still raw despite the weeks that had passed. "I confronted him and he denied everything. Called me paranoid, said I was imagining things, so I decided to test him. I told him I'd been in an accident, that I couldn't walk, that my father had disowned me for breaking the engagement. I wanted to see if he would stay when all he could have was me. Just me, without the money and the privilege." Michael's stance hadn't changed, but his eyes registered something, not sympathy, not yet, but perhaps understanding of the impulse, if not the execution. "He left me at that gas station when I refused to call my father and clear up this mess," as he put it. "Just drove away with my suitcase still in his car. I started walking, pushing that empty wheelchair along, not sure where I was going. When I saw your truck coming, I sat in the chair. I thought you'd be more likely to help a stranded, disabled woman than one who could walk. I never intended to maintain the lie. It was supposed to be one night, just until I could figure out my next step." Michael finally moved, dropping heavily into the armchair across from her. His hands formed fists on his knees, then relaxed with visible effort. And then, when one night became two, then a week, then a month. What was your justification then, Charlotte? The way he said her name like it had turned bitter on his tongue made her flinch. Then I met Lucy. And you. I saw how genuine you both were, how you accepted me without question, without wanting anything in return. It was something I'd never experienced. The longer I stayed, the harder it became to tell the truth. I was afraid of losing this, whatever this is becoming. Michael's laugh held no humor. So you decided that lying to us every single day was better, that pretending to be disabled, mocking the genuine struggles of people who can't walk was justified because it made you feel good. The accusation struck like a physical blow. Charlotte had never considered that Angle had been so wrapped up in her own deception that she hadn't recognized the broader implications. I didn't think of it that way. That was wrong of me. Inexcusable. Michael stood abruptly and walked to the window, putting distance between them. The mountains beyond the glass reflected his own state, cold, immovable, shadowed. What else weren't you telling us? Was there even a James? Are you actually engaged, or was that another convenient story? Charlotte's spine straightened, pride flashing through her shame. James Thompson exists. Our engagement was real, as was his betrayal. I haven't lied about my feelings, Michael. Just about my circumstances. Michael turned his face now, a mask of controlled anger. Yet you let me build ramps, install grab bars, modify my home for a disability that didn't exist. Do you have any idea how tight money is for us? How many extra hours I worked to pay for those materials? Each word drove the knife of guilt deeper. Charlotte had known about his financial struggles, but had never connected them to the accommodations he'd made for her. I didn't ask you to do those things. Her defense sounded hollow even to her own ears. You didn't have to ask. I did them because I thought you needed them. Because that's what decent people do when someone they care about needs help. The emphasis on decent people wasn't lost on Charlotte. The implication that she might not belong in that category stung with the particular pain of truth. Michael's shoulders dropped suddenly, the anger giving way to something worse, disappointment. Where is your wheelchair now? The one you came with in the guest room closet. I've been using the one you repaired. Michael nodded once, then walked toward the hallway. I'll get it for you. Charlotte scrambled to her feet, the movement instinctive after weeks of pretending it was impossible. Wait, what are you doing? Michael didn't look back. You should leave. Lucy will be home from school in 2 hours. I'd prefer if you weren't here when she arrives. The finality in his voice froze her in place. You're asking me to go? Just like that. Michael stopped at the edge of the hallway, his back still to her. What did you expect? That I'd thank you for deceiving us, for playing with my daughter's emotions, for making me trust you? When he finally turned, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Lucy already lost her mother. I won't let her be hurt by someone who chose to enter our lives under false pretenses. Charlotte felt her world collapsing all over again. But this time it was entirely her own doing. Can I at least explain to Lucy, say goodbye? The look Michael gave her would have been kinder had it held only anger. Instead, it carried the weight of broken trust of a man who had opened himself up only to be wounded in the place he was most vulnerable. I think you've done enough explaining. I'll handle Lucy. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Charlotte alone with the consequences of her choices. When he returned minutes later with her original wheelchair and the small bag she'd arrived with, his face had hardened into resolution. I've called a taxi service from town. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Charlotte felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She deserved this exile, this severance from the only genuine happiness she'd known in years. Fighting it would only compound her selfishness. Michael, I know it doesn't matter now, but I meant everything else. How I feel about you, about Lucy. The person you came to know, that's the real me, even if the circumstances were a lie. Michael busied himself gathering her few possessions, refusing to meet her eyes. It does matter. That's why this hurts so much. The taxi arrived exactly as promised, the driver looking curiously at Charlotte standing beside her wheelchair on the porch. Michael loaded her bag into the car without a word, then handed the driver a folded bill with instructions to take her to the Mountain View Hotel in town. The last image Charlotte had of the Harper home was Michael standing on the porch, shoulders squared against the weight of another loss, another person walking out of his life. Only this time the departure was justified, the loss a necessary excision rather than a cruel twist of fate. As the taxi wound down the mountain road, Charlotte finally allowed herself to cry, not for the comfort she was leaving behind, but for the family she had glimpsed the possibility of the future that her deception had poisoned at its roots. The Mountain View Hotel was the only accommodation in the small town of Pine Ridge, a three-story structure that had seen better days but maintained a certain rustic charm. The lobby featured stone fireplaces and mounted animal heads, a tribute to the hunting culture that sustained much of the local economy. Charlotte checked in under her real name, using the emergency credit card she had kept hidden in the lining of her bag. The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly at the Mitchell surname, but in this remote corner of Montana, even tech billionaires didn't command the immediate recognition they might in coastal cities. The room was clean but basic, with a view of the town's main street rather than the mountains that had given the hotel its optimistic name. Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, contemplating her next move. She could call her father. Bernard Mitchell would send a private jet without hesitation, whisk her back to the penthouse in Manhattan, and surround her with the luxurious cocoon that had always been her safety net. The thought held no appeal. She could rent a car drive to the nearest city and disappear into anonymity. Start over somewhere new, using her considerable resources to build a life on her own terms. The freedom was tempting. Instead, she found herself dialing the number for Sunset Valley Care Center, asking to speak to Martha Harper. When the receptionist hesitated, Charlotte identified herself as a friend of the family and waited while the call was transferred. Martha's voice, when it came, held the sharpness Charlotte remembered. "Well, this is unexpected. To what do I owe the pleasure, Miss Mitchell?" The older woman's use of her last name startled Charlotte into momentary silence. "Oh, don't sound so surprised. I may be old and occasionally forgetful, but I know how to use Google." Bernard Mitchell's daughter goes missing right before her society wedding, and a mysterious blonde in a wheelchair shows up in my son-in-law's life. Not such a leap, dear. Relief washed over Charlotte. At least with Martha, there would be no need for explanations or justification. "Does Michael know you recognized me?" Martha snorted. "Michael sees only what's in front of him, and even then only what he's ready to see. I assume since you're calling me instead of chatting with him over dinner that he's discovered your little charade." Charlotte closed her eyes against a fresh wave of shame. "Yes, this morning. He asked me to leave before Lucy got home from school." "Smart man." The approval in Martha's voice was evident even as it stung. "He's protecting his daughter. That's what good fathers do." "I never meant to hurt them." The protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Martha's sigh crackled over the phone line. "Intentions are pretty little things, aren't they? Shiny and perfect until they meet reality. Then we see what they're really made of." The rebuke was gentle but firm, coming from a woman who had seen enough of life to recognize self-deception when she encountered it. "Why did you call me, Charlotte? Surely not for absolution." The question cut to the heart of the matter. Charlotte had been asking herself the same thing since dialing the number. "I need to make this right somehow, not for myself, but for them. Michael is drowning in medical bills and mortgage payments. He's at risk of losing the family property. And Lucy," Charlotte's voice broke, "Lucy deserves so much more than I gave her." Martha was quiet for a long moment. "You care for them?" That at least wasn't a lie. "No, that was the most honest I've ever been." Another silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the care facility, distant conversations, a television, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. "There's something you should know about Michael." Martha's voice had softened. "He doesn't forgive easily, not because he's hard-hearted, but because he gives his trust so completely. When it's broken, the damage goes deep." Charlotte felt the truth of those words like a physical ache in her chest. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to help, even if they never know it came from me." Martha hummed thoughtfully. "Money won't fix what you broke, child." "I know, but it might keep them from losing their home, their history. It might give Lucy stability while Michael heals from what I've done." "And what do you get from this arrangement?" The question caught Charlotte off guard. She hadn't considered what she would gain, focused entirely on what she could give to make amends. "Nothing. I get nothing except knowing I did one right thing in the middle of all my wrong choices." Martha's laugh was surprisingly warm. "Well, that's a start. Perhaps there's hope for you yet, Miss Mitchell." They spoke for a few minutes more, Martha providing the details of the bank holding the mortgage on the Harper property and the care facilities billing department. No mention was made of Charlotte's father or her own plans for the future. When they said goodbye, Martha's parting words lingered in Charlotte's mind long after she had hung up. The hardest journey isn't finding your way home, Charlotte. It's becoming the kind of person who deserves to be welcomed when you arrive. 2 days later, James Thompson stepped through the doors of the Mountain View Hotel, his designer suit and city shoes marking him as immediately out of place among the flannel-clad locals. His eyes scanned the modest lobby with barely disguised disdain before settling on Charlotte, who sat waiting in a corner armchair. She had known he would come eventually. The hotel clerk had mentioned a man asking questions around town, showing her picture, offering rewards for information. Pine Ridge was too small for secrets, its residents too practical to refuse good money for simple information. Charlotte, James stepped toward her, his handsome face arranged in an expression of concern that might have fooled her 2 months ago. I've been worried sick. Your father has had private investigators searching across 3 states. Charlotte remained seated, taking in the man she had once agreed to marry. His perfectly styled hair, his manicured nails, the subtle flash of his platinum watch beneath his shirt cuff, all the trappings of success without the substance. How did you find me? James smiled with self-satisfaction. The wedding dress was a stroke of luck. A hunter mentioned seeing a blonde in a wedding gown near the old logging road back in October. After that, it was just a matter of following the trail to the Harper place, and then here. He reached for her hand, which she deliberately moved out of his grasp. Charlotte, baby, it's time to come home. Your father is beside himself. The press is speculating wildly, and the board is questioning his stability with all this family drama. We need to present a united front. The casual we, the assumption that she would fall in line with his plan, it was breathtaking in its arrogance. Charlotte felt a clarity she hadn't experienced even during her time with the Harpers, when she had been living a lie of her own making. I'm not going anywhere with you, James. Our engagement is over. It has been since the moment you left me stranded with nothing but a wheelchair and the clothes on my back. James's expression hardened, the mask of concern slipping to reveal the calculation beneath. Be reasonable, Charlotte. You made your point with that little stunt. I admit I should have handled it better. But we both know you need me as much as I need you. Charlotte laughed, the sound free of bitterness or regret. That's where you're wrong. I don't need you. I never did. What I needed was to learn who I am without the Mitchell name and fortune defining me. And these past 2 months, despite my many mistakes, have taught me exactly that. James's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the lobby as if checking for witnesses to his humiliation. Fine. Play your independence game a little longer if you must. But your father wants to see you. He's at the hospital in Billings for cardiac tests brought on by the stress you've caused, I might add. At least have the decency to let him know you're alive and well. The mention of her father's health sent a chill through Charlotte. Bernard Mitchell was many things demanding, emotionally distant, consumed by his business empire, but he was still her father, the only parent she had left. Despite their complicated relationship, the thought of him ill because of her disappearance filled her with genuine concern. Is he really in the hospital? James sensed his advantage and pressed it. Admitted yesterday. The doctors are monitoring his heart. He's nearly 70, Charlotte. This disappearing act of yours might have shaved years off his life. Charlotte stood gathering her resolve along with her coat and purse. I'll go see him. Alone. You can tell me which hospital, or I can call his assistant and find out myself. James's frustration was evident in the tight line of his mouth, but he recognized defeat when he saw it. Billings Memorial, East Wing VIP floor. I'll have them add you to the visitors list. Charlotte nodded, already moving toward the door. I trust you'll handle the bill here before you leave. Consider it the last of your obligations to me. She felt his eyes boring into her back as she walked away, carrying herself with the confidence of a woman who had lost everything only to discover, however, that what remained her true self was more than enough. The drive to Billings took nearly 3 hours, giving Charlotte ample time to prepare for the reunion with her father. The rental car's heater struggled against the November chill, a far cry from the climate-controlled luxury vehicles she had taken for granted in her previous life. Billings Memorial Hospital's VIP floor was a world removed from the standard ward's private rooms, with high-end furnishings, gourmet meal options, and discreet security to ensure privacy for wealthy or prominent patients. Charlotte identified herself to the nurse at the station, who directed her to room 512 with a deferential smile. Bernard Mitchell sat propped up in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than Charlotte had ever seen him. At 68, he remained handsome, his silver hair and patrician features lending him a distinguished air, even in a hospital gown. He was reading something on a tablet, fingers swiping with the impatience that characterized his approach to everything. When the door opened, he glanced up, his expression shifting from irritation to shock to carefully controlled emotion in the span of seconds. Charlotte, his voice revealed what his face concealed: relief, concern, and a threat of uncertainty that she had never heard from him before. She moved to his bedside, searching his face for signs of the cardiac distress James had described. What she found instead were the familiar indicators of stress, the tightness around his eyes, the slight downturn of his mouth, but nothing that suggested imminent heart failure. "Are you really sick? Or was that James's embellishment to get me here?" Bernard set the tablet aside, acknowledging the directness of her question with a slight nod. "My doctor insisted on some tests after my blood pressure spiked during a board meeting. Precautionary, nothing more. James has always had a flair for the dramatic when it serves his purposes." The confirmation of James's manipulation didn't surprise Charlotte, though it did cement her certainty that ending their engagement had been the right decision. "You disappeared." Bernard's tone held no accusation, just stated fact. 2 months without a word. Your accounts untouched. Your phone disconnected. For a time we thought. He didn't complete the sentence, but Charlotte heard the unspoken fear. They had thought her dead, another tragedy in the Mitchell family saga. "I'm sorry for that part, for making you worry. I needed to. I needed to find out who I am when nobody knows who I'm supposed to be." Bernard studied her with the keen gaze that had intimidated corporate rivals and government regulators alike. "And what did you discover?" Charlotte smiled, the expression genuine despite the circumstances. "That I'm stronger than I knew. That I value honesty and simple kindness above all the luxury and status I was raised with. That I want a life with purpose beyond being Bernard Mitchell's daughter or some man's trophy wife." Bernard leaned back against his pillows, something like pride flickering across his features. "Your mother would have approved. She always said you had her spirit beneath all that finishing school polish." The mention of her mother, rare from Bernard, who had retreated into his work after her death, brought unexpected tears to Charlotte's eyes. "She would have told me to run away sooner." A ghost of a smile touched Bernard's lips. "Probably. Amanda never did appreciate the gilded cage even when she chose to stay in it for our sake." The conversation shifted, then Charlotte, sharing edited versions of her time in Montana, omitting the wheelchair deception, but describing the Harper family, the simple beauty of their life, the genuine connections they formed without wealth or status as factors. Bernard listened with unusual attentiveness, asking questions about Michael's business, Lucy's artwork, the economic challenges facing small towns like Pine Ridge. When Charlotte mentioned her desire to help the Harpers financially without revealing her identity, he nodded thoughtfully. "We could channel it through the Mitchell Foundation, set up a community development grant for the area, provide small business funding, establish a scholarship fund for local students, including this Lucy you're so fond of. All above board, no direct connection to you." The offer was vintage Bernard, practical, comprehensive, leveraging the family's resources and influence to solve a problem efficiently. Yet beneath the business-like approach, Charlotte sensed something new. A father's desire to help his daughter make amends, to support her even in choices he might not fully understand. "I'd like that, thank you." Bernard waved away her gratitude. "It's what family does." "Speaking of which, James informed me you've ended your engagement," rather dramatically from his telling. Charlotte tensed, prepared for disapproval or pressure to reconsider. Bernard had enthusiastically supported the match, seeing James as an ambitious young man who understood the corporate world and could potentially take on leadership roles within Mitchell Technologies. Instead, Bernard surprised her. "He was never good enough for you." The simple statement, delivered without elaboration, left Charlotte momentarily speechless. "But you practically pushed me into accepting his proposal." "You said he was perfect for the Mitchell series." Bernard's expression turned regretful. "I said what I thought you wanted to hear. You seemed determined to make a conventional choice, and James appeared to make you happy. I didn't want to stand in your way, even if I had reservations about his character." The revelation that her father had seen through James from the beginning, but had supported her choice anyway, added another layer to Charlotte's understanding of Bernard. Perhaps he wasn't the cold, controlling figure she had painted in her mind. Perhaps, like her, he was simply doing the best he could with the emotional tools available to him. Their conversation continued until a nurse arrived to check Bernard's vitals, announcing that the doctor would be in shortly with test results. Charlotte rose to leave, promising to return the next day. As she reached the door, Bernard called after her. "Charlotte," his voice held an uncharacteristic hesitation. "Whatever you decide to do next, whether you come back to New York or build something new elsewhere, I want you to know I'm proud of you for finding your own way." The words so long yearned for and now freely given washed over Charlotte like a benediction. "Thank you, Dad." The endearment "Dad" instead of the more formal "father" she had used since adolescence marked a shift in their relationship, a new beginning, built on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. In the hospital parking lot, Charlotte sat in her rental car for several minutes before starting the engine, processing the unexpected reconciliation with her father. The conversation had given her clarity about her next steps, about the person she wanted to become, and the amends she needed to make. The next morning, Charlotte met with Bernard's personal attorney, who had flown in from New York at her father's request. Together, they structured a series of financial transactions designed to assist the Harper family and the broader Pine Ridge community without revealing Charlotte as the source. First, the mortgage on the Harper property would be purchased by a Mitchell subsidiary and forgiven, with documentation suggesting a bank error in the property's original valuation had been discovered during an audit. Second, a trust would be established to cover Martha's care at Sunset Valley for the remainder of her life, presented as part of a corporate program supporting elderly residents with connections to education, Martha's teaching career making her an ideal candidate. Third, the Mitchell Foundation would announce a significant investment in Pine Ridge's economic development, including grants for small businesses like Michael's woodworking enterprise and scholarships for promising students. All of it was arranged with the meticulous attention to detail that characterized the Mitchell approach to business, ensuring the benefits would reach their intended recipients without raising suspicions about their origin. When the paperwork was complete, Charlotte thanked the attorney and returned to her father's hospital room to say goodbye. Bernard had been cleared by his doctors and was preparing to return to New York the following day. "You don't have to disappear again." Bernard's tone was careful, neutral, respecting her autonomy while making his preference clear. Charlotte squeezed his hand. "I'm not disappearing, I'm just finding my path. I'll stay in touch this time, I promise. I've authorized a new account for you, no restrictions, no oversight. It's yours to use however you see fit." The offer represented more than money. It was Bernard's acknowledgement of her maturity and judgment, his willingness to support her independence rather than control her choices. Charlotte accepted with a simple thank you, neither rejecting his assistance out of pride nor falling back into financial dependence. It was a new dynamic between them, adult to adult, each recognizing the other's strengths and respecting their differences. As Charlotte drove back to Pine Ridge that evening, her mind filled with possibilities. She couldn't return to the Harper household. That chapter had closed with her deception. But perhaps she could build something new in this place that had shown her what genuine living felt like. The email arrived in Michael Harper's inbox 3 days later, its sender unfamiliar, its subject line intriguingly direct. "Regarding your mortgage with First Heritage Bank." Michael opened it warily, expecting yet another warning about his payment status. Instead, he found himself staring at an official notice that his mortgage had been reassessed and forgiven due to an internal valuation error discovered during a regulatory compliance audit. The property was his free and clear, effective immediately. He read the document 3 times, searching for the catch, the hidden clause, the eventual demand for payment. There was none. Just corporate letterhead, official language, and a signature from a vice president he had never heard of. The phone call from Sunset Valley came an hour later. Martha's account had been selected for the Legacy Educators Program, a corporate initiative covering all expenses for retired teachers with distinguished careers. The administrator couldn't provide details about the selection process, but assured Michael that everything was legitimate and no further payments would be necessary. That same week, a letter arrived announcing the Mitchell Foundation's investment in Pine Ridge, including specific grant opportunities for local artisans and craftsmen. Michael's name was mentioned specifically as an exemplary representative of traditional craftsmanship deserving of development funds. The convergence of these events, too perfectly aligned to be coincidental, left Michael with a certainty that cut through his confusion and disbelief. Charlotte. Despite the bitterness of her deception, despite the pain of their parting, something in him softened at the realization. She had found a way to help without intruding, to make amends without seeking forgiveness or recognition. Lucy, perceptive as always, watched her father's expression change as he read the Mitchell Foundation letter at the breakfast table. "It's from her, isn't it? Charlotte did this?" Michael looked up, startled by his daughter's insight. He had told Lucy a version of the truth when Charlotte left, that she had been keeping secrets and needed to go away to fix some problems in her life. He had absorbed Lucy's tears and confusion, her sense of abandonment and betrayal, while managing his own complex emotions about the woman who had briefly become part of their family. "I think it might be. The foundation is named Mitchell. That was her last name." Lucy was quiet for a moment, pushing cereal around her bowl. Is she coming back? The simple question carried the weight of a child's hope, the resilience that allowed Lucy to still care despite the hurt. Michael wished he could offer certainty, but all he had was truth. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't think so." Lucy nodded, processing this with the same maturity she had shown through all of life's difficulties. "I miss her. Even if she lied about some things, she never lied about caring about us. I could tell." Out of the mouths of babes, Michael thought his daughter's instinctive wisdom cutting to the heart of the matter in a way his adult complications could not. Lucy had identified what was real beneath the deception, the genuine connection that had formed between them, all the authentic caring that had transcended Charlotte's initial falsehood. The realization didn't erase the pain of betrayal or magically restore trust, but it cracked open a door that Michael had firmly closed in the heat of discovery and disappointment. Maybe there was more to understand about Charlotte Mitchell than he had been willing to consider in that moment of raw hurt. Later that night, after Lucy was asleep, Michael found himself on the porch with his guitar, picking out melodies that had been dormant for years before Charlotte had encouraged him to play again. The music flowed more freely now, the notes carrying emotions he couldn't yet put into words: confusion, gratitude, lingering anger, and beneath it all, a current of something that felt dangerously like longing. The Mitchell Foundation's local representative arrived in Pine Ridge the following week, a competent woman named Sarah Jenkins, who set up temporary office space in the town's small business center. She met with local entrepreneurs, community leaders, and school officials, outlining grant opportunities and application procedures with efficient enthusiasm. When Michael's turn came for a consultation, he entered the makeshift office with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Ms. Jenkins greeted him warmly, her professionalism tinged with what seemed like special interest in his work. "Mr. Harper, the foundation is particularly impressed with your craftsmanship. We'd like to discuss funding options to expand your business, perhaps establish an apprenticeship program to preserve traditional woodworking skills in the community." The offer was generous, the terms favorable. As she outlined potential amounts and timelines, Michael found himself asking the question that had been burning in his mind since the first email arrived. "Why me? There are dozens of small businesses in Pine Ridge. What makes my woodworking shop special to the Mitchell Foundation, Mistos?" Jenkins' expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Knowledge she wasn't sharing, perhaps, or instruction she was following. The foundation values authenticity and traditional craftsmanship. Your work exemplifies both. As for specific selection criteria, I'm afraid I'm not privy to the board's deliberations. It was a polite deflection, neither confirming nor denying any connection to Charlotte. Michael decided to be more direct. Does Charlotte Mitchell have anything to do with these grants? The name landed between them like a stone, dropped in still water, sending ripples through Ms. Jenkins's careful composure. "I'm not personally acquainted with any members of the Mitchell family, Mr. Harper. The foundation operates independently, though of course the family has input on major initiatives." Another non-answer that told him everything he needed to know. He signed the preliminary paperwork for the grant application, thanked Ms. Jenkins for her time, and left with the growing certainty that Charlotte's hand was guiding these changes in his life from a distance. The knowledge should have angered him. Who was she to decide what he needed to sweep in with her family's fortune and fix things without his consent? Yet all he felt was a complicated gratitude tinged with regret for what might have been if honesty had formed the foundation of their relationship from the beginning. 3 months after Charlotte's abrupt departure from the Harper home, Michael received a package with a New York postmark. Inside was a book, a collection of art therapy exercises designed for children processing grief. A note on the title page read simply, "For Lucy. These helped me after my mother died. Perhaps they'll help her too." The handwriting was Charlotte's, but there was no return address, no further message, no invitation to respond. Just a gift for his daughter chosen with thoughtful care and sent without expectation. Michael placed the book on Lucy's nightstand that evening without comment. The next morning, he found her already awake, paging through it with rapt attention, colored pencils arranged beside her. "She sent this, didn't she?" Lucy didn't look up from the page, where she was carefully drawing in solid a heart-shaped outline. "Yes," Lucy nodded, continuing her drawing. "I'm still mad at her, but I'm also glad she remembered me." The simple wisdom of his daughter's response, holding both anger and appreciation, simultaneously accepting the complexity of human relationships instead of reducing them to all good or all bad, humbled Michael. Perhaps there were lessons he still needed to learn from his child. Days turned to weeks. Winter settled fully over Montana, blanketing Pine Ridge in snow that transformed the landscape into a pristine wonderland. Michael's business flourished with the foundation grant, allowing him to hire an assistant and accept larger commissions that had previously been beyond his capacity. Lucy thrived too, her artwork evolving through the exercises in Charlotte's book, her nightmares becoming less frequent, her smile appearing more readily. They visited Martha weekly, delighting in her sharp wit and growing collection of knitted projects now that her care was secured and her medication properly managed. Life had stabilized, improved in measurable ways, yet in quiet moments, Michael found himself wondering about Charlotte, where she was, what she was doing, whether she had found whatever she was searching for when she appeared on that logging road in a torn wedding dress and a wheelchair she didn't need. The answers began to emerge through an unexpected source. Martha, during one of their visits, handed Michael a newspaper clipping with a knowing smile. "Thought you might find this interesting." The article from a regional business journal highlighted the Mitchell Foundation's newest initiative, a program supporting children who had lost parents, providing art therapy resources and counseling services in underserved communities. The accompanying photograph showed Charlotte Mitchell presenting the program to a group of healthcare professionals. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothing simple but elegant, her posture conveying a confidence that hadn't been there before. The caption identified her as the program's founder and director, noting her personal commitment to childhood grief support. Michael studied the image, searching for the woman he had known in this new iteration of Charlotte. She was there in the gentle smile, the attentive tilt of her head, as she listened to someone outside the frame, the graceful hands that had once carved wood under his guidance. Martha watched him with shrewd eyes. "She's in Billings twice a month for the program's regional meetings. Stays at the Grand Hotel downtown." Michael looked up sharply. "How do you know that?" Martha's smile was innocent, her eyes anything but. "We talk occasionally. She calls to check on me, make sure the care is satisfactory. Such a thoughtful young woman." The revelation that Charlotte had maintained contact with Martha all these months, had been receiving news of the Harpers through his mother-in-law, sent a jolt of something like betrayal through Michael, followed immediately by the ironic recognition that he had no right to feel betrayed by others' honesty when deception had defined their relationship. "She asks about you and Lucy." Martha continued, ignoring Michael's conflicted expression. "Never directly, mind you. Very careful are Charlotte. But an old woman knows when someone is dancing around what they really want to know." "Martha." Michael's tone held warning. "What are you doing?" His mother-in-law patted his hand with exaggerated patience. "I'm giving you information, Michael. What you do with it is entirely your choice. But after Ellen died, you wrapped yourself in grief like armor. It protected you, but it also isolated you. Then Charlotte came along and somehow slipped past those defenses despite all her mistakes. That's not nothing." Michael stood uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I should check on Lucy. She's in the activity room with the art therapist." Martha's voice followed him to the door. "She'll be in Billings next Tuesday. The foundation is hosting an event at the Children's Hospital. Public event, anyone could attend." Michael didn't respond, but the information lodged in his mind, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. A choice presenting itself whether he wanted it or not. A seed planted, waiting for him to decide if it deserved water and light. The Billings Children's Hospital lobby buzzed with activity as staff volunteers and guests gathered for the Mitchell Foundation's art therapy program launch. Colorful banners featuring children's artwork hung from the walls, and display tables showcased the therapeutic materials being donated to hospitals across Montana. At the center of it all stood Charlotte fielding questions from local media with a poise that belied her inner nervousness. Michael watched from the periphery, half hidden behind a support column. He hadn't planned to come. For days after Martha's revelation, he'd dismissed the idea as impulsive and unwise. Yet Tuesday morning found him making arrangements for Lucy to spend the evening with a friend, driving the 2 hours to Billings, with no clear intention beyond seeing Charlotte with his own eyes. She looked different, not just the shorter haircut or simpler clothing, but something fundamental in her bearing. The careful armor of privilege had been replaced by an authentic confidence. She spoke with passion about childhood grief, about art's power to heal emotional wounds, about the foundation's commitment to underserved communities. Nothing in her manner suggested the deceptive woman who had entered his life in a wheelchair she didn't need. When the formal presentation ended, Charlotte circulated among the attendees, shaking hands and engaging in conversations that appeared genuinely warm rather than performatively charming. She hadn't noticed Michael yet, giving him the momentary advantage of observation without confrontation. A hospital administrator approached Charlotte leading a shy girl of about 10 who clutched a sketchbook to her chest. The child's thin frame and colorful headscarf suggested she was undergoing cancer treatment. Charlotte immediately knelt to the girl's level, her focus narrowing to this single interaction, as if no one else existed in the crowded room. Michael couldn't hear their exchange, but he watched as Charlotte gently encouraged the girl to share her artwork. When the sketchbook opened, Charlotte's face transformed with delight and admiration. The girl's hesitation melted into pride as Charlotte pointed to specific elements in the drawing, clearly offering thoughtful praise rather than generic compliments. Something twisted in Michael's chest, recognition, perhaps of the same genuine care Charlotte had shown to Lucy during her time with them. Whatever deceptions had brought Charlotte into their lives, her connection with his daughter had held truth at its core. The child eventually departed with her administrator, leaving Charlotte momentarily alone near a display of art supplies. Michael found himself moving forward before conscious decision caught up with instinct. 3 steps, then 5, then he was standing before her, the shock of recognition widening her eyes as blue as the Montana sky he'd fallen into months ago. Michael, her voice carried the softness of someone speaking a treasured name they'd thought never to say aloud again. The careful speech he'd rehearsed during the drive evaporated. He managed only the simplest truth. "You look well." Charlotte nodded, composure returning gradually. "So do you. The foundation grant seems to be helping your business." The reference to her behind-the-scenes intervention hung between them, neither accusation nor apology, simply acknowledged fact. "It has. The mortgage cancellation, too. And Martha's care." Michael held her gaze steadily. "That was all you, wasn't it?" Charlotte didn't deny it. "An attempt at amends. It doesn't erase what I did, but I hoped it might ease the practical burdens at least." A young foundation staff member approached, then retreated hastily upon sensing the tension between them. Charlotte glanced around the crowded lobby, then gestured toward a nearby corridor. "Could we talk somewhere more private?" Michael nodded, following her to a small waiting area off the main thoroughfare. The space held several comfortable chairs, children's books scattered across a low table walls, decorated with framed artwork from past patients. Charlotte sat smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "How did you know I'd be here?" "Did Martha tell you?" Michael's lips twitched. "She mentioned it. Subtlety isn't her strong suit." A ghost of a smile touched Charlotte's face. "No, but loyalty is. She's fiercely protective of you and Lucy. I'm fairly certain she only tolerates me because she thinks I might eventually prove worthy of another chance." The hint that Martha had been playing matchmaker didn't surprise Michael, though the revelation that Charlotte had interpreted it the same way sent a jolt of something uncomfortable through him. He chose his next words carefully. "Why are you doing all this, the foundation work, the grants, the financial assistance? If it's about guilt—" Charlotte interrupted, a flash of the steel beneath her composure. "It started as guilt, yes, but it's become something more. When I left Montana, I realized I had 2 choices. Retreat to my privileged bubble and treat the experience as a strange interlude, or build something meaningful from what I learned during my time with you and Lucy." Her gaze dropped to her hands, then lifted with renewed resolve. "I chose the latter. The foundation work isn't penance, Michael. Its purpose. For the first time in my life, I'm using the Mitchell resources for something that matters deeply to me, not just as tax write-offs or image enhancement. The sincerity in her voice resonated with the Charlotte he had come to know. During those autumn weeks, the woman who had sat with Lucy for hours working through math problems, who had offered insightful suggestions for his furniture designs, who had listened to Martha's stories with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. Lucy asks about you sometimes. Michael hadn't planned to mention his daughter, but the truth slipped out. She's been using the art therapy book you sent. It's helping her. Charlotte's composure wavered momentarily. I'm glad. She deserves every possible tool for processing her grief. She's an extraordinary child. The silence that followed felt charged with unspoken questions, paths not taken, possibilities foreclosed by past mistakes. Charlotte broke it first, her voice steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. I won't ask you to forgive me, Michael. What I did was inexcusable. But I want you to know that every other part was real. My feelings for you and Lucy, the person I became in your home, the values I discovered mattered to me. The wheelchair was a lie. Everything else was the truest version of myself I've ever been. Michael studied her, searching for signs of manipulation or calculated charm. He found none, just a woman owning her mistakes while affirming her truth, expecting nothing in return. Why did you leave without saying goodbye to Lucy? That hurt her more than the deception itself. Charlotte flinched as if struck. I wanted to spare her further pain. You made it clear you didn't want me there when she got home from school, and I thought a clean break would be kinder than dragging out a damaged relationship. Her hands twisted in her lap. It was a mistake, another one. I should have fought to explain myself to her, to apologize properly. I've regretted it every day since. The admission held no defensiveness, no attempt to justify or minimize. Just honest regret for a choice that had caused harm to a child she genuinely cared about. Michael felt something tight within his chest begin to loosen. Not forgiveness yet, but the possibility of it. Their conversation continued awkward at first, then flowing more naturally as they updated each other on the past 3 months. Charlotte spoke of her reconciliation with her father, her decision to direct a portion of the Mitchell fortune toward meaningful philanthropy, her new apartment in Billings, modest by her previous standards, but chosen specifically to maintain a connection to Montana while giving the Harpers necessary space. Michael shared Lucy's progress in school and art, the expansion of his woodworking business, Martha's improved health now that financial stress no longer limited her care options. Neither mentioned James or the possibility of rekindling what had briefly flourished between them before the deception was revealed. As the hospital event concluded around them, Charlotte checked her watch reluctantly. I should help with the cleanup and thank the staff. Will you be heading back to Pine Ridge tonight? Michael nodded. Lucy's with a friend, but I promised to pick her up by breakfast. Charlotte stood smoothing her skirt again in what he now recognized as a nervous gesture rather than a societal affectation. It was good to see you, Michael, truly. He rose as well, towering over her slight frame without the wheelchair that had once balanced their heights. Good to see you too, Charlotte. The words were simple, the sentiment genuine. As they parted ways in the hospital lobby, Michael carried with him the certainty that this meeting, however unexpected, had been necessary, a first step toward healing a wound that had festered beneath his anger and sense of betrayal. The drive back to Pine Ridge through darkness and light snow provided ample time for reflection. Michael found himself remembering not just Charlotte's deception, but all that had followed it, the joy she had brought to Lucy's life, the companionship she had offered, when loneliness was his most faithful companion, the way she had helped him rediscover parts of himself buried beneath grief and responsibility. By the time he pulled into his friend's driveway to collect Lucy, Michael had reached a decision that felt neither impulsive nor calculated, but rather the natural conclusion to months of unconscious processing. Some journeys couldn't be completed alone. Some healing required the presence of the very person who had caused the injury. Lucy bounded down the porch steps when she spotted his truck, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. She climbed into the passenger seat with a flurry of energy, immediately launching into stories about her sleepover adventure. Halfway home, during a lull in her chatter, Lucy fixed him with the penetrating gaze that reminded him so much of Ellen. You look different today, Dad. Did something good happen? Michael considered deflection, then chose honesty, the kind he wished had characterized his relationship with Charlotte from the beginning. I saw Charlotte yesterday, at an event in Billings. Lucy's entire body stilled, her expression cautious, as if afraid to hope. "Did she ask about me?" "She did. She said you're an extraordinary child." Lucy processed this, her fingers tracing patterns on the backpack in her lap. "Is she still mad that we found out her secret? Are you still mad?" The questions cut to the heart of adult complexities with the simplicity only children can manage. Michael chose his words carefully, respecting Lucy's intelligence while acknowledging her emotional stake. "I think she's mostly mad at herself, and I'm not as angry as I was. Sometimes people make bad choices even when they're good people underneath. Like when you told Mrs. Peterson you'd finished your math homework last month, remember?" Lucy nodded solemnly. "I was afraid she'd be disappointed in me. But then it got worse because I had to keep pretending and the lie got bigger and bigger until I couldn't fix it anymore." The insight stunned Michael with its perfect parallel to Charlotte's situation. The small deception that had spiraled beyond control, the fear of disappointment driving continued dishonesty, the eventual collapse when truth inevitably emerged. "That's right. And what happened after you finally told the truth?" Lucy sighed dramatically. "I got in trouble. But then it was over, and I didn't have to worry about getting caught anymore. And you said you were proud of me for being brave enough to tell the truth, even though it was hard." Michael reached across to squeeze her hand. "Exactly. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit when we've made a mistake." The remainder of the drive passed in comfortable silence, Lucy eventually dozing against the window while Michael contemplated the path forward. By the time they reached the cabin, his decision had solidified into certainty. The next step would require courage from all of them. 2 weeks passed before Michael acted on his resolution. He spent the time observing Lucy, gauging her readiness for the conversation he planned, consulting with her school counselor about the best approach. When he finally felt prepared, he called the number Martha had accidentally left visible on her side table during their last visit. Charlotte answered on the second ring, her voice cautious when he identified himself. "Michael, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. I'm calling because—" The carefully rehearsed speech evaporated, leaving only direct truth. "Lucy would like to see you, to talk about what happened. If you're willing." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Michael wondered if the connection had dropped. When Charlotte finally responded, her voice held a tremor she couldn't quite control. "Of course. Whenever and wherever would be best for her. I can come to Pine Ridge, or if you prefer, neutral territory." Michael interrupted gently. "The cabin would be best. It's where everything happened. It seems right to address it there." They arranged a time Saturday afternoon, allowing Lucy the security of familiar surroundings and the comfort of knowing she could retreat to her room if the conversation became overwhelming. Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about Lucy's current state of mind, how much Michael had explained about their history, what expectations he had for the meeting. The care in her inquiries, the focus on Lucy's emotional well-being rather than her own desire for absolution, confirmed for Michael that he had made the right decision. Whatever mistakes Charlotte had made, her concern for his daughter was genuine. Saturday arrived with the crisp clarity of late February snow glistening beneath bright sunshine, the promise of approaching spring evident in the quality of light, if not yet the temperature. Michael had explained to Lucy that Charlotte was coming to talk about what had happened, that she could ask any questions she wanted, that her feelings, whatever they might be, were valid and important. Lucy had nodded with solemn understanding, then spent the morning meticulously organizing her art supplies and selecting drawings she wanted to show Charlotte. The sight of her careful preparations, her willingness to re-engage despite past hurt, filled Michael with pride in his daughter's resilience and emotional wisdom. Charlotte arrived precisely at the agreed time, her rental car crunching over the gravel driveway, now cleared of snow. Michael met her on the porch, struck by the symmetry of their positions. Charlotte standing nervous and uncertain at the threshold, Michael opening the door to a home that had briefly been hers. She had dressed simply, jeans, a blue sweater that matched her eyes, boots appropriate for the Montana winter. No artifice, no attempt to impress or distract with appearances. Just Charlotte as authentic as she had been during their final weeks together before the deception unraveled. "Thank you for coming." Charlotte nodded, her eyes scanning the familiar cabin exterior. "It feels strange to be back. Good strange, but still." Michael stepped aside to let her enter. "Lucy's in her room. She's a little nervous. That makes two of us." Charlotte removed her coat, revealing a small package tucked beneath her arm. "I brought something for her. Not a bribe, just She trailed off clearly, second-guessing the appropriateness of a gift under the circumstances. I'm sure she'll appreciate it. Michael led the way to Lucy's bedroom door, knocking gently. She's here, Lucy Goose. Ready when you are. The door opened slowly, revealing Lucy in her favorite weekend outfit, overalls covered in paint splatters, a purple sweater Ellen had knitted before her illness, hair pulled back with mismatched clips. She regarded Charlotte with wide, cautious eyes, neither hostile nor welcoming, simply watchful. Charlotte knelt to meet Lucy at eye level, exactly as she had with the child at the hospital. The gesture held no condescension, just respect for Lucy as an individual deserving of equal footing in this difficult conversation. Hello, Lucy. Thank you for letting me visit today. Lucy studied Charlotte's face with the unfiltered intensity only children can manage. You lied about not being able to walk. Dad says you were scared. The directness of the accusation, delivered without anger, but with clear expectation of truth, set the tone immediately. Charlotte didn't flinch from it. I was scared, yes, but that doesn't make what I did okay. I lied to you and your dad, and that was wrong, no matter what reason I had. The simple acknowledgement, free of excuses or deflection, seemed to satisfy something in Lucy. Her posture relaxed slightly. I was really mad at you, and sad too. I thought we were friends. Charlotte's composure wavered, the pain of Lucy's words evident in her expression. We were friends. We are friends if you still want to be. My lie doesn't change how much I care about you, Lucy, but I understand if you don't trust me anymore. Lucy considered this, head tilted in serious contemplation. Dad says sometimes good people make bad choices. Is that what happened to you? Michael watched from the doorway, my heart swelling at his daughter's capacity for nuance and her willingness to seek understanding rather than simple condemnation. Charlotte glanced at him briefly, gratitude in her eyes for the foundation he had laid for this conversation. Yes, that's what happened. I made a very bad choice, and then I was too afraid to fix it because I love being here with you and your dad. I was afraid if I told the truth, I would lose you both. Lucy nodded, processing this with the seriousness the admission deserved. But you lost us anyway when Dad found out. Charlotte bowed her head briefly, accepting the truth of this assessment. Yes, that's what happens with lies. They might seem to work for a while, but they always fall apart eventually. I learned that the hard way. The conversation moved to Lucy's room, where she had prepared a space at her small table. Michael retreated to give them privacy while remaining close enough to intervene if Lucy became distressed. Through the partially open door, he watched his daughter question Charlotte about the deception, her motives, her feelings afterward, each inquiry delivered with the unvarnished directness of childhood, but without cruelty. Charlotte answered everything honestly, never sugarcoating her actions or offering adult justifications that would confuse responsibility. She apologized clearly and specifically for the hurt she had caused, acknowledged that trust, once broken, required time and consistent truth to rebuild, and expressed hope that Lucy might someday feel safe in their friendship again. When Lucy showed her recent artwork, including pieces created using the therapy book Charlotte had sent, the conversation shifted from reconciliation to genuine connection. Charlotte offered thoughtful observations about Lucy's developing style, suggested techniques she might enjoy exploring, and shared stories of her own childhood attempts at artistic expression. The transformation was remarkable, tension melting into engaged interaction, wariness giving way to cautious warmth, the natural affinity between them reasserting itself beyond the shadow of past deception. Later, as afternoon drifted toward evening, the three of them gathered in the kitchen. Lucy had requested Charlotte's help with a special art project, and they worked side by side at the table while Michael prepared a simple dinner. The domesticity of the scene echoed their days together before the truth had shattered their fragile family unit, yet something had shifted fundamentally. This time, there were no secrets between them, no performances or hidden agendas. Just three people finding their way toward a new kind of relationship built on hard-won honesty and the choice to begin again with open eyes. Over dinner, Lucy dominated the conversation with school stories and detailed explanations of her latest art techniques. Charlotte listened with genuine interest, asking questions that demonstrated her attention to Lucy's world. Michael contributed occasionally content, mostly to observe the healing unfolding before him. When Lucy eventually excused herself to continue her project in her room, Michael and Charlotte remained at the table, the silence between them companionable rather than strained. She's remarkable. Charlotte's voice held admiration tinged with wistfulness. The way she processes complex emotions, her capacity for forgiveness, while still protecting herself, she's wiser than most adults I know. Michael nodded, pride evident in his expression. She gets that from Ellen. The ability to see the whole person, not just their worst mistake. Charlotte met his gaze directly. And from you, that kind of emotional intelligence doesn't develop in a vacuum. She's had an excellent guide. The compliments settled between them, neither accepted nor deflected. Michael cleared their plates, then returned to the table with 2 mugs of coffee, the domestic gesture bridging past and present. What happens now? Charlotte's question held no presumption, merely openness to possibilities. Michael considered his answer carefully. Lucy would like to see you again. She suggested you could come for dinner sometimes. Maybe help with her art projects occasionally. And yeah, Charlotte's gaze remained steady, accepting whatever answer might come. Michael traced the rim of his coffee mug, gathering thoughts that had been forming since their meeting at the hospital. I think we need to start over. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but not letting it dictate the future either. Charlotte nodded slowly, hope cautiously awakening in her eyes. What would starting over look like to you? Honesty, time, space to rebuild trust. Michael looked up from his coffee to meet her gaze directly. Maybe we could begin with dinner in town next week. Just the two of us. Talk about who we are now, not who we were then. The invitation hung between them. Not a promise of forgiveness or reconciliation, but an opening toward possibility, a choice to explore what might grow from the ashes of what had burned. Charlotte's smile bloomed slowly, genuine emotion, replacing careful composure. I'd like that very much. When she left that evening, the goodbye held none of the finality of their previous parting. Lucy hugged her without reservation, extracting promises about future art projects and visits. Michael walked Charlotte to her car, the winter air crisp between them, stars emerging in the clear Montana sky. At the driver's door, Charlotte turned to face him. Thank you for today, for giving Lucy the chance to ask her questions and for considering that there might be a way forward for all of us. Michael nodded, his expression softening in the moonlight. Some broken things, when mended properly, become stronger at the fractured places. The words sparked recognition in Charlotte's eyes, an echo of their conversations about kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing pottery with gold to highlight rather than hide the damage. She had mentioned it while watching him restore an antique cabinet, drawing parallels between broken objects and broken people. Drive safely. Michael stepped back, allowing her the space to depart without the weight of expectations or demands. Charlotte smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I'll call you about dinner. As her car disappeared down the winding road, Michael remained on the porch, contemplating the strange circularity of their journey. She had arrived in autumn, broken and deceptive, but seeking something real. She returned in winter, honest and whole, offering amends without expectation. What might spring bring with its promise of renewal and growth? The months that followed unfolded with careful intention rather than romantic urgency. Charlotte maintained her apartment in Billings, dividing her time between the Mitchell Foundation work and regular visits to Pine Ridge. She joined the Harpers for dinner weekly, helped Lucy with art projects, and gradually became a welcome presence in their lives again, not as a replacement for what they had lost, but as something new and valuable in its own right. Michael and Charlotte developed a relationship built on deliberate honesty and clear boundaries. They shared meals in town, talked for hours about their pasts and potential futures, discovered common ground beyond the intensity of their first connection. Physical affection remained minimal. A brief touch of hands, a hug and greeting, or farewell, both understanding that rebuilding trust must precede deeper intimacy. By early summer, the foundation they had established felt solid enough to withstand greater risks. On a warm June evening, Michael invited Charlotte to walk with him to the oak tree where Ellen was buried. The request carried significant weight. This sacred space represented his most profound loss, his enduring connection to his first love, a threshold he had never crossed with anyone beyond family. Charlotte recognized the honor being offered, approaching the hillside with reverent respect. The oak stood majestic against the evening sky, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze, a simple stone marking Ellen's final resting place. Michael knelt briefly, straightening a small bouquet Lucy had placed that morning, then stood beside Charlotte in companionable silence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the peace of one who has traversed grief's darkest valleys and emerged into a different landscape, not unmarked but unbowed. Ellen would have liked you. Your honesty, now your kindness to Lucy, your willingness to rebuild from the ground up. She always believed in second chances. Charlotte's hand found his fingers intertwining with gentle pressure. I wish I could have known her. Everything about this place, about you and Lucy, carries her influence. Michael nodded, squeezing her hand in acknowledgement of the truth in her words. That won't ever change. She'll always be part of us, part of this land. The statement held no apology or qualification, simply truth offered with the expectation of acceptance. Charlotte turned to face him fully, her expression solemn yet hopeful. I wouldn't want it any other way. Love doesn't diminish when we make room for more of it. It expands, encompasses, transforms without replacing. The wisdom in her words, the acceptance of their complex reality confirmed for Michael what he had been gradually recognizing over months of careful reconnection. This woman, flawed like himself, capable of both significant mistakes and profound growth, had become essential to his vision of the future. A year after Charlotte Mitchell had appeared on a logging road, in a torn wedding dress and a wheelchair, she didn't need Michael Harper asked her to marry him. Not in grand gesture or public declaration, but during a quiet moment on the porch where so many pivotal conversations had unfolded between them. Her answer came without hesitation, a single word carrying the weight of their shared journey from deception through truth to hard-won trust, yes. Their wedding took place in the meadow behind the cabin, wildflowers providing natural decoration, the mountains standing witness to their unconventional path toward each other. Lucy served as both flower girl and ring bearer, her artwork transformed into invitations for the small gathering of friends and family. Bernard Mitchell attended his relationship with Charlotte, transformed from controlling parent to supportive father. Martha Harper, resplendent in a new dress she had selected specifically for the occasion, offered wry commentary and genuine blessing in equal measure. James Thompson received no invitation, his brief role in their story acknowledged, but not honored. The ceremony itself was simple vows they had written together, promises grounded in the reality of their imperfections rather than romantic ideals. They pledged honesty above comfort, growth above complacency, partnership in both joyful and difficult seasons. As the late afternoon sun gilded the proceedings in honeyed light, Michael and Charlotte exchanged rings crafted from wood and gold. The base material of Michael's craft, combined with kintsugi-inspired veining symbolic of their broken, then mended connection. That evening, after guests had departed and Lucy had fallen asleep surrounded by gift wrappings and cake crumbs, the newlyweds stood on the porch beneath a sky awash with stars. Charlotte leaned against the railing, Michael's arms encircling her from behind their bodies, fitting together as naturally as the complementary pieces of furniture he crafted in his workshop. I never imagined finding this. Charlotte's voice held wonder rather than disbelief. A place where I'm valued for who I am, not what I represent or provide. A family built on truth instead of expectation. Michael pressed a kiss to her temple, inhaling the scent of wildflowers from her hair. Sometimes life's wrong turns lead us exactly where we need to be. The observation held no bitterness about their difficult beginning, no lingering resentment about past deceptions, just acceptance of the strange, imperfect journey that had brought them to this moment, two broken people who had found wholeness not despite their fractures, but because of how they had chosen to mend them. In the distance, an owl called into the gathering darkness. Stars emerged one by one, pinpricks of light in the vast Montana sky. On the hillside beyond the workshop, the oak tree stood sentinel over memories honored rather than imprisoned by grief. And in the cabin that had witnessed both profound loss and unexpected renewal, a family slept beneath the sheltering night, not perfect, not unmarked by life's hardships, but bound together by choice, rather than circumstance, by love freely given with open eyes and honest hearts.